The Las Vegas Raiders are facing a crucial moment with big decisions ahead regarding their head coach, quarterback, and overall strategy for the NFL Draft. These choices will shape their future, and it's worth taking a moment to reflect on the direction they should consider moving forward. Recently, I came across a tweet suggesting that the Raiders might be a good landing spot for Daniel Jones, who was recently benched by the New York Giants. Jones is a player with clear potential and early career success, but he hasn't been able to replicate those results consistently. The Giants seem ready to move on from him. The idea behind the tweet is that the Raiders have some strong pieces in place to support a quarterback like Jones. They've got offensive weapons, a young offensive line with room to grow, and the potential to add even more talent. Names like Brock Bowers and Jakobi Meyers are already on the roster, and the Raiders could target someone like T. Higgins or Amari Cooper to further boost their receiving core. On the defensive side, the Raiders have a strong line and a solid overall defense when healthy. This gives them a balanced roster that could make them an appealing fit for a quarterback like Jones. Now, whether or not Jones is the right choice is up for debate. Personally, I trust Tom Lee in the direction he's steering the team, but the quarterback decision is one of the most critical for any franchise. Looking ahead to the upcoming draft class, it's important to note that it isn't considered as strong as last year's. In 2023, we saw 6 quarterbacks selected before the Raiders made their pick at 13th overall, a clear sign of how competitive the QB market was. This year, the picture is different. There's no clear-cut, must-have quarterback at the top of the class. Early in the season, Georgia's Carson Beck was the presumed leader, but now Cam Ward has emerged as the top choice for many scouts. Even so, this class hasn't lived up to the hype. For the Raiders, the challenge is clear. They must weigh all their options, whether that's pursuing a veteran like Daniel Jones, drafting a QB, or sticking with their current roster. Every move matters as they work to secure their long-term success. The Raiders are in a tricky position as they approach the NFL Draft, especially if they don't land the number 1 overall pick. If they end up with, say, the 5th pick, they'll face a tough decision. Should they take the 2nd or 3rd best quarterback available, or go in a different direction entirely? If they feel that players like Shedeur Sanders or Jalen Milroe aren't worth a top 5 pick, the Raiders might look at other options. They could target someone like Travis Hunter, a versatile playmaker, or Ashton Jeanty, who could bring explosive talent to the offense. Another route might be to bolster their defense by selecting a top prospect like cornerback Will Johnson, who many believe has the potential to be an elite NFL player. However, avoiding a quarterback at this stage raises the question, what's the plan at the most important position? They could stick with someone like Gardner Minshew, but the reality is that Minshew, while serviceable, has clear limitations. Even with a top-tier offensive coordinator, the ceiling with Minshew might only be 7-9 wins, a decent effort, but not enough to be truly competitive. Alternatively, the Raiders could look to the pool of underperforming young quarterbacks from other teams. Names like Mac Jones, Justin Fields, or Zach Wilson could be intriguing if the team believes one of them could turn their career around. Similarly, Daniel Jones or Sam Darnold could be veteran options with some untapped potential. Pairing one of these quarterbacks with a talent like Hunter, Johnson, or Jeanty could give the Raiders a chance to improve their roster and compete next season. It's clear that fans and analysts are pushing the idea of drafting a quarterback at all costs. Whether it's Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, or another top prospect, the expectation is to take a chance on someone who might become the franchise cornerstone. But here's the catch. What if that quarterback isn't truly worth a top 5 pick? The best case scenario is obvious. The Raiders draft a player like Sanders or Ward, and he develops into a franchise quarterback. The worst-case scenario, they use a high draft pick on a quarterback who doesn't pan out, someone with limited upside or who isn't ready for the NFL. The Raiders must carefully weigh their options. Do they focus on building a stronger overall team or gamble on a quarterback in a draft class that doesn't seem to offer a sure thing? This decision could define their future for years to come. One of the biggest risks for the Raiders is drafting a quarterback who doesn't pan out, only to look back years later and realize they missed out on a potential game-changing player at another position, like a franchise tackle or an Adrian Peterson caliber running back. It's a gamble that could set the team back for years. The Pittsburgh Steelers have taken a different approach that might be worth considering. Instead of putting all their chips on drafting a rookie quarterback and giving up significant assets, they've focused on building a strong, balanced roster. Their strategy? Bring in undervalued veteran quarterbacks who can manage games and let the rest of the team do the heavy lifting. Take Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, for example. When most teams were ready to give up on them, the Steelers took a chance, acquiring them at a bargain. With this approach, they've managed to stay competitive, winning 7, 9 games consistently and remaining among the top teams in the league. They've shown that a well-rounded roster can offset the need for an elite quarterback. The Steelers' success starts in the trenches. Their offensive line features 3 rookie starters, including a standout right guard and right tackle, though the latter has been temporarily replaced by their backup, B.R. Jones, due to injury. Despite not being dominant on the offensive line, they get the job done with a conservative offense that scores when it matters. Defensively, the Steelers shine. While T.J. Watt is an elite pass rusher and Minkah Fitzpatrick is a star in the secondary, the team's real strength is in its defensive scheme. They rely on discipline and execution to win games. Now compare this to the Raiders. Their offense isn't vastly different from the Steelers, and defensively, they aren't far behind either. The Raiders' biggest challenge has been staying healthy. If their key players return to full strength and they add one impactful player, someone like Will Johnson in the secondary, they could elevate their defense to the next level. We never got to see the Raiders' defense fully come together this season, partly due to injuries like Malcolm Koonce missing significant time. But with better health and a few smart additions, the Raiders could close the gap and compete at a much higher level without needing to take a risky swing on a quarterback. It's unfortunate that Malcolm Koonce had to sit out just before the season started. There were high hopes for him, as some believed he could produce at the same level as Maxx Crosby. In fact, he even matched Crosby's performance in the second half of last season. If Koonce had been healthy alongside Crosby and Christian Wilkins, the Raiders could have had one of the most dominant defensive lines in the NFL. With those two on the field, the defense was already showing promise, and they were making big plays. Had Koonce been part of the equation, the Raiders' defense could have been a top-tier unit. But the silver lining is that, in theory, the Raiders could bring this defensive line back next season. With Crosby and Wilkins leading the charge, and if Koonce is healthy, the defense could be even stronger. Adding a game-changer in the secondary, like Travis Hunter or Will Johnson, could push the defense to new heights. Or the Raiders might target someone like Mason Graham, who could become a future superstar. However, there's also the quarterback situation to consider. Sam Darnold will be a free agent next year, and the Minnesota Vikings are unlikely to bring him back. Based on his performance this season, Darnold could land a 2- or 3-year contract worth $25 million. The Raiders could think about bringing him in as a veteran option, but the question is, who will be leading the team next season? The future of head coach Antonio Pierce is still up in the air. If he stays, the offensive coordinator position will be crucial. It could be someone like Scott Turner, or maybe Pierce will bring in a new coach of his choosing. A possible candidate could be someone like Cliff Kingsbury, if the Saints end up making coaching changes, or another coach who could help develop the team's offense. But here's the key issue. If Pierce stays and the Raiders draft a quarterback, can Pierce develop him into a long-term starter? This is an important question, especially considering how many quarterbacks have struggled early in their careers. Many get thrown into starting roles before they're ready, only to be pulled after a short time, leaving their potential unfulfilled. We've seen quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold find success years later after being written off. The Raiders will need to consider whether they have the right coaching staff in place to help any new quarterback grow and succeed. Sam Darnold is in his 7th year and has shown improvement this season, much like Baker Mayfield did last year. This raises an important point for the Raiders. There are multiple paths they can take, but a lot will depend on the decision about Antonio Pierce. Something tells me that Mark Davis isn't ready to fire Pierce just yet. The Raiders seem determined to establish consistency, both with their coaching staff and their roster, rather than continuing with constant turnover. For that to happen, consistency at the top is key. Tom Telesco and Antonio Pierce aren't tied together. If one goes, the other could stay. Telesco, having just arrived, is likely to remain for at least the next 5 years. This gives Pierce some room to prove himself. If he can't get it done this season or next, the Raiders could move on from him and bring in a new head coach, with Telesco still at the helm to continue building the roster. Looking at the best teams in the NFL, it's clear that they either have a great head coach or a well-run organization that excels in drafting talent. Take the Kansas City Chiefs, for example. They have an outstanding head coach in Andy Reid, a top-tier quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, and a general manager who is exceptional at evaluating talent. The Raiders, however, don't have that level of consistency yet. While they're still figuring out their quarterback and head coach, they do seem to have a general manager in Telesco who could help turn things around. His first 2 picks, Brock Bowers and Jackson P. Johnson, look like future stars. Both have the potential to be top players at their positions. If Telesco continues to draft well over the next few years, the Raiders could be in a much better position. It's easy to look back and wonder, what could have been? What if they had drafted Christian Darrisaw instead of Alex Leatherwood, or C.D. Lamb instead of other wide receivers, or Jalen Carter instead of Tyree Wilson? But with a solid talent evaluator like Telesco at the helm, the future could be bright for the Raiders if they allow him to continue shaping the team. The Raiders have missed out on some potential stars over the years, but the best approach right now might be to avoid reaching for a quarterback. From what I've been hearing, Shedeur Sanders isn't guaranteed to be a first-round pick. He might go in the first round simply because quarterbacks tend to get overvalued, but the current quarterback class isn't looking strong. This is part of the reason why so many quarterbacks were drafted last year. Some people even think that if quarterbacks like J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix were in this draft class, they would be considered the top options. So while everyone seems to want a quarterback, we should seriously consider whether it's the right move for the Raiders. Instead of forcing a pick, we need to think long-term about how to build the team for sustained success. One of the issues the Raiders have faced in recent years is skipping crucial steps, which has only left them stuck in the same spot with no real progress. To succeed in the long run, the Raiders need a solid offensive line, a strong defensive line, a good coaching staff, reliable coordinators, and, of course, smart drafting. You can't skip these steps. So rather than reaching for a quarterback who might not be the right fit, let's focus on building the team properly. Let me know what you think. Do you agree with this approach? If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you next time with more content.